They are fast becoming the best fans in the league. They
Yeah.
pack out opposition stadiums all through Australia.
It's one of those ones for the Eels, I think, more so that when you're playing with another team, you sort of get dragged down to their standard. The good news is that next week, round 24, the Tigers play the Dragons. It'll be an absolute belter. Don't miss that game, whatever you do.
Well, Steve, we challenged the top four teams, particularly the top two, to show us what they've got, and they flex their muscles, and we'll talk about that. What else we got, mate?
Mate, we chat about the Cowboys and where to after an 82-12 pumping on the weekend. And also, what do we get and what are we expected to get out of the teams that are now out of contention, like the Storm and the Broncos?
Absolutely, and we'll have a brief chat, very brief, about the worst game of NRL I've seen in many years. And as I'm sure many did, you said you turned it off, but unfortunately, it was like a train wreck for me. I couldn't turn away. Let's get into it. So we got a heap of traction on some of the content that went out last week, particularly around the idea that if the Warriors can't make the top two, then maybe they're not a genuine chance. We got lots of love, but we also, the Warriors fans, they come hard. And one guy, I won't repeat exactly what he said to us, but he called us "see you next Tuesdays" and told us to go what's the word? Copulate with a particular round marsupial. What the hell's going on, mate?
Yeah. It was brutal, mate. I've caught plenty of sledges in my time, but I don't think I've ever been told to go and do that before. So I wasn't expecting it, mate. There's no doubt the Warriors fans are equally defensive and passionate all at once. So how good's rugby league when you've got fans like that? It's good that we've both had a bit of a laugh and a joke over it because it was very colourful, the comment. I don't know whether he listened to the whole podcast, mate, because we've been very high on the Warriors all season, and nothing's changed for me. As I said, I still think it'll be challenging if they don't finish in the top two, but certainly not out of the question, mate. They've been super impressive and fully fit. They'll continue to be absolute leading contender, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said to me before we hit record, like we've been so complimentary to them all year. The moment you say anything negative, they just want to fight you.
Yeah. Well, we haven't had a reaction like that all season, and we've said some few controversial things. I put a line through the Broncos about a month ago when we didn't hear anything out of that. But you say the Warriors may not do it if they finished third or fourth, and they absolutely come off the back fence. So. Look, certainly keep it coming. It was, I'm sure it was delivered in good nature. It was certainly received that way, but it was a bit of fun, mate. But good on you for being so passionate about your team's efforts.
Exactly. I'm not sure it was said in good nature, but we definitely received it that way. Very good. They are fast becoming the best fans in the league. They pack out opposition stadiums all through Australia. The crowd that they had there at the Titans on Saturday afternoon was incredible. I mentioned it here when it was the same when they came to Para, and they're not abusive. They're not assholes or arrogant like some fans are. They're good natured. They cheer, and they certainly let you know if they're going well and you're not. But they're not just the passion, but the representation. Obviously, we've talked about how it's really grown in New Zealand, but the Warriors contingent in Australia is growing by the week, and I think it's a good story. I think we're all sick of enough of the other top teams that we'd be quite happily see the Warriors or the Sharks win compared to the alternative.
Yeah, 100%, mate. Look, there's no doubt the Warriors fans are one of the best group of fans in the comp, and they keep growing, right? Every year, we talk about Magic Round. Caxton Street and Suncorp is just filled with Warriors fans when they play. We talk about the Gold Coast. There is a big contingent of Kiwis that live on the Gold Coast, and they got behind them on Saturday afternoon. There's no doubt about that. I guess the biggest pat on the back you can have for the Warriors fans is they've been that good and that strong that it looks like it's a lock that New Zealand in the South Island will get the 20th team. Now, that's on the back of how well the Warriors have been supported, how well they're performing, obviously, but the ratings on TV, the commercial spend, how many people are getting through the door, both home and away. There's a lot of teams out there that do very well on their home ground, but as soon as they travel away, the fans don't go with them. Well, the Warriors are completely opposite to that. So, I hope they continue to support their team very passionately. And to your point, as soon as those final four teams get down to the business end, there'll be a lot of people hop on the Warriors and the Sharks bandwagon, because the last thing we need is a Panthers or a Roosters winning another competition. We've seen plenty of that, so I think they'll get a lot of team, a lot of secondary supporters hop on at the back end of this season, mate, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be on the bandwagon, whips cracking for sure. You mentioned on the Gold Coast, and Mark Tukey on the show a while back, and he's working for the Warriors there in Logan for like a junior academy, and so yeah, it's a massive nursery there. How good would it be to have that team in the South Island? Like we go then from Perth, that'd be an interesting away trip for both those teams, but we have, and then you got PNG. With all the noise they're making, it starts to become a pretty exciting comp. You just want to hope your team's not the one languishing at the bottom of the 20. But yeah, just as a neutral observer and lovers of rugby league and the NRL, mate, pretty exciting future.
Yeah, 100%. I'm sure there'll be plenty of talk over the off-season that we'll start talking about some of these other clubs and the direction that they're heading. But it's huge. Obviously, it helps with the different time zones with TV from Perth to Auckland or the South Island. So that certainly helps making sure that we keep the TV and the money coming in and keeping all them happy. But yeah, it's just exciting to be able to see us talking about what we've got right now, let alone what's coming. So yeah, huge pat on the back for the Warriors fans. But we'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks, especially this weekend, not to jump too far ahead. Yeah. But what a huge game we'll talk about on our Wednesday show coming up for the Warriors.
Absolutely. Now, we said those top four teams flex their muscles. Of the four games, it's kind of hard to compare given what happened with the Roosters. Like, do you remember I was saying last week, someone's going to pay? Like when the Roosters click, someone's going to pay. I don't think anyone could have conceived that it could have been that sort of massacre. Now, clearly the Cowboys were flat as, but at the same time, everything just seemed to click for the Roosters, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely astonishing performance. The Roosters as a whole, Walker himself, you were big on Walker having a bit of a sluggish exit out of Origin. Well, he turned it on, and the rest of the team went with him. To think they did that without Tedesco in the second half, he succumbed to an ankle injury.
Could have been more.
Could have been more, yeah. So just an outstanding performance from the Roosters. You can't ask for much more than that. Actually, they were totally dominant in every facet. 48 points in the first half. It was over and done with after 20 minutes, obviously. But to keep the foot on the pedal is big, just mentally. It would have been quite easy for the Roosters just to clock off there. And it's really important for their for and against. So with Penrith and the Warriors having a much better for and against, and the Sharks for that matter as well, those 70 points are going to be could turn out to be really, really important at the back end of the season. So huge mental performance for them just to be able to continue to score tries and continue to push each other out there on the field, mate. So very impressive performance.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Sam Walker. There's two things that really stood out for me. There was the double chip and chase. Now, the Brett Mullins one from the mid-90s has been lauded as one of the greatest ever tries, and I just fear that one will get buried underneath the avalanche of the 82 points. But that's just freakish. Like,
Yeah.
he got the bounce, but then to be able to hit it on the run and just hit it perfectly, and then the regather, like, that's just crazy skill.
Yeah, just natural ability, just
That
oozes
guard.
out of that. Yeah, exactly right. So,
Yeah.
everything he touched turned to gold. And to your point, the Cowboys certainly helped the Roosters in a lot of facets, but it's not easy to be able to do that. Obviously, it's hasn't happened for almost 100 years, which goes to show you how big a task it was. So, anyone who was doubting the Roosters clicking, obviously has to rethink their opinion on that. And an interesting one, and again, we'll talk about it on our Wednesday episode, but interesting what they got coming up on the back of that. So they go back to Sydney against the Bulldogs. So it'll be interesting to see how they come up after such a dominating performance. They're obviously riding a high. It'll be interesting to make sure they come out and start again from scratch on this weekend. But hats off to them. One of the performances of the season.
Yeah, there's every chance that they'll be flat after that, but I can see them just going on a roll now and really cementing that top 2 spot. The other thing I wanted to talk about with Walker is there was a moment there with Nawaqanitawazi when he actually gave him a spray for not being in the right position for the kick and then also not chasing hard enough. And to me, that says that impact of being in that Origin arena and now becoming a real leader, being the halfback that is dictating, and like that's what you need to be a champion halfback. So that's actually a big step up for him as well. The other 3 teams were also super impressive. You can't really compare the Roosters because that's a complete blowout. But of the other 3 games, which one was the most impressive, do you think?
Oh, look, that's a really interesting one. All 3 teams, I think, Warriors, Panthers, Sharks, were really clinical. The Sharks scoreline looks a bit closer than what it was. They obviously had someone, Teague Wilton went to the sin bin. Kale and Iro went down with the HIA. So that resulted in, a bit of a mix-up with their interchange. They also lost, I want to say it was Katoa, but one of the other outside backs for a little while as well. Might have been Talakai, actually. So there was a little bit of a disruption, and for them to continue to put on the points was really impressive. As to were the Warriors, mate. I know we spoke about the Warriors at the beginning of the show, but 42 points against the Titans, and the Titans have been playing well, right? They hadn't been out there putting 40 points and winning games, but they'd been really playing well in the grind. And the Warriors just turned up. Their middle forwards really performed so strongly for them, and their outside backs did the job. Probably for me, though, was the Panthers. I thought the Panthers were the better of the teams, taking into account the Roosters blowout. I thought they were just absolutely clinical. I didn't think at any stage the poor old Raiders really had a chance. They obviously scored the first try of the game, but the Panthers were just absolutely clinical. When you consider that they didn't have Edwards, they still don't have Mitch Kenny, I thought that was just an absolute outstanding performance. The Raiders had been on a bit of a roll since then. They'd been building on the back end of Origin and were looking quite good. But the Panthers just absolutely annihilated them, mate. From the get-go, they were just super with the ball and with the defence. That defensive line had so much more speed. It was almost like, okay, Origin's done. We've had our A period. We're going to hit the go button. And, they were just simply too good for the Raiders and too good by a long way.
Yeah, and we talked about Talangi being out and Cogger coming in, and he certainly shored up that left side defence and was pretty handy with the ball as well. We also talked about Cleary being the absolute favourite for the Dally M. He just cemented that with a masterclass. If it was possible, his confidence just seems to have gone to a whole other level after Origin, and we'll get to his halves partner for the Blues, but it's worked for one of them, but maybe not so much for the other. So we'll come back to that in a bit. I tend to agree that the Panthers were impressive, and I think if you're looking at the form line of the teams they were playing against, as good as the Titans have been, and the Bunnies, the Raiders have really been building to something in the last month, and we even talked about it. I think you might have even picked them as a potential upset. and they were just never. Yes, they scored the first try, but Cleary's just toying with them, particularly on the Panthers right and the Raiders left. It was quite a performance.
Yeah, 100%, mate. They were really good. I think the Cogger change, there's a lot of talk after the game from Cleary, or both Clearys for that matter, about Cogger and Nathan seeing the game similarly. They have the same ideas about it. And I think not only how they went out and attacked with the football, but I think the defence was why they made that change as it was with Talangi. But look, hats off to the Panthers. They were really good. I can see Cogger keeping that spot unless something goes wrong now. I think it's his spot. I think that's how good he was. I see Blaise Talangi being in the 18-19 jersey where they can throw him on if they need a spark. Mitch Kenny's just been it's just been released on some of the news platforms that he looks like he's behind in his recovery, and he may not be back till semi-final time. So that'll be one for them to get through. But Edwards should be back, if not this week coming. He should be back the week after. So they're just about full fitness, fresh. And look, they're going to be very hard to beat. But what a cracking game we're going to watch this coming weekend, mate.
Yeah, 100%. Now, talking about next weekend game, of course, we'll go into more detail on the Wednesday show. I just want to see the Roosters really cement what they did the other night. The Dogs have been on a bit of a roll, but I don't think they've actually played anyone of note. And as good as the improvement's been, we haven't really seen where they're at against the highest of quality opposition. So it'll show us two things: how far the Dogs have come, and if the Roosters can start getting some consistency, because then we'll start taking some serious notice. And yes, they won in an absolute canter, but we want to see them do that, be that ruthless against a team that's on the up. So that's also a big game in how we judge that top four. Either way, that whoever gets beaten in that first round of the top four, you just think the bottom four will be cannon fodder.
Yeah, I think this weekend, if any, and we spoke about it on last week's show, I think this weekend's just proved that the top four teams are a long way ahead of the bottom four. And I know that, some in the bottom four are limping in with injuries. The Dolphins have had Qatar out for a while and a huge Origin contingent. Knights have obviously got Brown and Lucas, Latrell, and a cast of thousands out for the Rabbitohs. But there's just such a big gap for mine between the top four and the rest. There's going to look like it's not as big over the next couple of weeks because a number of teams play each other. Penrith play both the Roosters and the Warriors, and there's a little bit of that coming over the next few weeks. So the numbers won't seem that there's that big a gap. But if you actually sit back and watch the quality of the game, watch how fast it is, watch the ball movement and how they're trying to pull apart defensives, you see that there's just a huge gap between the top four and the rest. And I think that's only going to continue in until semi-final time, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. Just you touched on that bottom four. And you talked about Newcastle just then, and it was kind of like, they lose Brown and Lucas, maybe they're done. But how good, Fletcher Sharp was good, but how good was Manu Leilua, the big man? He was playing like a veteran back rower, and that pass, when he went back against the grain and then threw it across his body about 30 metres to the winger, mate, he's going to be some player if he isn't already.
Unbelievable. Not just for him to have the confidence as a young player to be able to do that. A lot of players come in at this level. He's only 22 years of age, and it's just do my job, put my head down, make my tackles, don't make any errors with the football, do my hit ups, kick chase, just all the basic stuff. For him to have had the impact he has this early has been quite outstanding. And then for him to be able to have the confidence and then the ability to pull off something like that, wow, he could be something serious for the future. If he continues to go, he's a big body, he's 6'3", 110 odd kilos. For him to be able to move the way he does, he could have an absolute massive future in front of him.
Yeah, and with a big smile on his face, just making yards for fun. Yeah, man, exciting. Oh, it's we talked about the 20-team competition, and maybe depth will be challenged, but the game just has a way of continuing to produce these young stars. It's phenomenal. The other thing we're going to talk about was some of the teams that are now officially out of calculation and sort of where to next for them. One thing that I think will be looked at quite intently, if not the end of this year, but definitely next year, is that the Storm have been successful and they've built a massive following. But we've also seen with the Swans how important it's been, and for the Lions in Brisbane, how important it's been for the AFL for those two teams to be successful, to make sure the interest stays up and the crowds grow because they want to expand the competition. What was noticeable there the other night is that there was a massive contingent of Bulldogs fans, and they were drowning out, compared to what it's been all year, a fairly average Melbourne crowd. I've got a feeling that's going to be concerning. And okay, it's 1 year, and it's probably they've been written off so many times and kept producing, but this is the first time that they have actually fallen in a hole. They've had some big names exit. I noticed Blaw's just signed with the Broncos for next year. They've got a couple of other guys off contract, others sort of looking around. If they can't find their way back to the 8 next year, yeah, that it's worrying signs for the Storm and also for the league, really. I mean, I won't hate it as a fan, but in terms of that bigger picture of the NRL, it'll be concerning.
Yeah, mate, I hadn't really thought about it, but when you talk about the crowds, obviously Melbourne's got so many other options available to them, so they're not going to keep on turning up if they're not winning to support a team. I think the big story for me with the Storm this year has been the injuries. They've just absolutely copped it for all the way back from Esi Katoa, what happened to him over the World Cup. He was a huge loss for them. On the back of Kamikamica, the list goes on. The Harry Grants and the Cam Munsters, the Hugheses, they've all had time out. Xavier Coates, went into the season as one of the best wingers in the world and hasn't played a game. So there's been a lot of that happening. Obviously, for next year, there's going to be a few more movements, to your point with Blaw. They lose Will Warbrick to the Warriors, but gain Asako from the Dolphins. So there's going to be some player movements, but I think we've seen with a number of clubs even go up and down throughout the season that if the Storm don't have their guns on the park, they all of a sudden drop down to become a middle of the road club. And you talk about their three guns. If Penrith lose Cleary, Yeo, and Edwards all at once, then they're going to come back to the field as well. So I think you've seen that with Melbourne. I think the big thing next year will be, is it going to be Bellamy and Munster's last year at the Storm? Are they going to leave together? Is Munster going to head off to the PNG Chiefs? And is Bellamy going to retire? And I think that storyline is going to fester and bubble along until they make a decision and make it public. So for me, I think that they need to finish this season off strong. And I don't necessarily mean the wins. I just mean the performances. Continue to play like Melbourne. And you've seen that the last few weeks. While they haven't been winning, they're 1-3 over the last month of footy since Munster got injured, but they've busted their arse. You've had to go out and beat them, right? They haven't beaten themselves. So I think they need to continue to play like that. And Bellamy made a few comments at a press conference this morning around his expectations. So I think you'll continue to see that high standard. But for me, next year, they have to go through injury-free. Like those big three have to play, and they need Coates. Obviously, Asako is extremely reliable and durable. He's played every game the Dolphins have played since they've come into the competition. But they're going to need those big three to be fit and firing for the entire season. Then you'd find a brave man to pick them not to make the 8 on the back of them three being fully fit. But great shout about what the future of the Storm look like, mate, without Bellamy, without Munster. Could be interesting times ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the shows they were posing the idea, will Harry Grant never win a premiership? And you, at face value, you go, oh, that's just nonsense. You'd imagine he would. But if that does happen, the future of the Storm is then a massive unknown. You mentioned the injuries. It's funny that the media narratives, the Storm have almost been defended for their injuries. South to a certain degree. Para, yes and no. But the Broncos, it's almost like there's no excuses for them. Like, it just shows the completely different way that things can be spun based on the attention that they get, and how some particular personalities in the mainstream NRL media like to come at certain personalities and certain teams.
Yeah, mate, I think the Broncos, you hit the nail on the head. I think it's completely and utterly the media. I think, the Herald and Telly in Sydney and the Courier Mail up here in Brisbane, I think they just go at each other like they do at Origin time. And I think the Broncos, being the biggest marquee club, obviously last year's premiers, I think they just cop it. I will say I think they brought a bit of it on themselves this year. Injuries aside, there doesn't look like there's the same intensity. There doesn't look like there's the same connection and involvement from the players. Now, we won't know. We're not on the inside, obviously, about what's going on. But to me, they just seem disjointed. While I'm confident in saying that you're going to get that huge amount of effort out of the Storm for the rest of the year, no matter who's on the park, whether they win or lose, with the Broncos, you can't confidently say that you're going to see an absolute knock them down, drag them out effort, whether they win or lose. No. Like the effort on the weekend just unfortunately wasn't good enough. And this is for a club who, foolishly in my mind, but they thought there was still a chance of winning a spot in the final 8, and they go out and play like that. To me, it's more of a injuries. Don't get me wrong, but there's been more of a effort, involvement, connection, all these buzzwords, but it just doesn't seem to be happening at the Broncos. And some of those media outlets that have been waiting to stick the knife in are gladly putting their hand up for it at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting point from our old mate from Fox Sports days, Andy Raymond. He basically has a bit of a run through of the weekend and some of his thoughts, and he's been big on this for a while. He's like, Pat Carrigan's a bit overhyped, and I hadn't really thought about it, but the timing of it was Carrigan had a bad miss in the middle of the park for one of the tries. He also had a couple of moments with the ball he would have liked back. Is that unfair?
Look, I'll say this to you. You're going to find out next year, because right now he's taken the second hit up after Payne Haas, right? Now, with all due respects, there's a lot of players out there that look like superstars taking the second hit up after Payne Haas. He's not going to have that next year. Now, whether it's Xavier Willison, whether it's another one of these front rowers that are going to step up and lead the pack, obviously Mitch Barnett's coming in. But there isn't going to be Payne Haas, and I think they severely underestimate what he does. So it doesn't matter who we talk about in the Broncos pack. I think all of them have a reputation that's been, helped and highlighted by the fact that they've had Payne Haas packing down next to them. So regardless of where they've gotten to and how big their reputation is, I think the Broncos forward pack has to start from scratch next year and earn their reputation again, without the big man that just continues to work his ass off, play big minutes, and just dominate every team he comes up against, because it is going to be a different world for them taking that second and third hit up when Haas hasn't done damage on hit up number 1.
Absolutely, and they lose their other grand final prop from last year, Corey Jensen, who had his emotional retirement during the week. So, yeah, it will be really interesting. You talked about connection. One of the things that the Panthers have done well to back up year after year and win multiple premierships is that sense of connection. Now, clearly, that is not the case. So, for all the work does, I know Madge actually prioritises the mental side of things, but maybe there is a few missing links there in whatever he's got set up, because as good as they were the week before, that all gave us, or 2 weeks before, that gave us hope that they were back. They were pretty poor the other night, and the Knights were good, but they weren't fantastic. So it's a bit of a whimper really for the Bronx to round out the season. So if we talk about you mentioned next year. Last year, the top four, it was Canberra, Melbourne, who else have I got? Raiders. Actually, Raiders were top, wasn't it? Yeah, I already said that. The Dogs and... the Bronx, who they only had the 15 wins. They scraped into the four. You talked about consistency. They really weren't that consistent. But all four of those teams are not going to make the 8. Has that ever happened?
Yeah, I can't remember it. Usually, traditionally, there's only 1 or 2 out of the previous year's 8 that misses. Usually, on average, it's about 6 that make it again.
So I can't remember. It's usually the bottom of the 8 that slips out mate. Too.
Yeah. I can't remember 4 missing. I certainly can't remember the top 4 missing. I think you got to go back to the West Tigers winning. I want to say they were
05.
05. You got to go back to the Tigers for a premiership winning team not to make the 8 the next year. So that goes to show you about how important that is. But all 4 is staggering. And look, they've all got their excuses. They'll all look at injuries. They'll all look at some changes in the rules, etc., etc. The Bulldogs are obviously still a sniff. There'll be Bulldogs fans watching this hoping that they scrape in. But the reality is whether they scrape in or not going to do much damage when they get in, no matter how good they're on a roll when they come up against those top 4. So it is a huge change. And then, you talk about the Broncos as well with how big a club they are. If they don't pull their finger out, the last 4 or 5 games, they've got the Dolphins, the Warriors, the Raiders in Canberra, the Storm and the Bulldogs. I can see a case that they don't win another game. They may pick up a couple of them, don't get me wrong. They've certainly got the talent to do so. But the way they're playing at the moment, you're not going to make them favourites in too many of those games. So, they could finish already. The Tigers have got more wins than them. They're just waiting on a bye that they got coming up this week. The Tigers, so they could quite easily find themselves in second last spot. It's mind-boggling to see the club perform the way they have this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't see the Dogs making it. They may well prove me wrong, but just looking at their recent results, they were against a massively depleted Storm. They kind of did just enough. The Storm did not go away, and the scoreline kind of blew out at the end. Fantastic win against the Warriors, but they were definitely flat, the Warriors. Beat the Tigers, but who doesn't? Then they got pumped by the Raiders. They beat the Titans. Yeah, not bad. They scraped home against the Seagulls and Para the week before that, and the week before that they got beaten by the West Tigers. So as good as they've been on a roll, I'm not convinced, and I just think there's the teams above have just got too much going on to slide out the back door, and maybe I've gone off a bit early, and the Dogs fans might want to put this one and come back at me. I noticed the top 2 post, 9 people have saved it, so there's a few Warriors fans who got that up their sleeve, ready to unload. To unload.
Can't wait. I hope they finish in the top 2 then, so we don't hear about it.
No, we will hear about it. We want them to finish outside.
Mate, for me, the Bulldogs, whether the Bulldogs make it or not, sits on the Cowboys and how they come back from their loss to the Roosters. I think if the Cowboys pack it in from here, I think that the Bulldogs scrape in because, that's all that's left. No one from 10th down, they can't make it. It's going to be a bridge too far for them. So it'll be all up to the Cowboys. I think it's still the Cowboys' spot. But if they have decided to head for Bali on the back of the Roosters game, then the Bulldogs scrape into 8. But to your point, mate, I can't see them getting anywhere near one of those top 4 teams, even if they do get through the first week of the semis. Yeah,
agree. Now, that's a good little segue, mate. You've worked in the media before or something. But our next topic, are the Cowboys done? You got a guy who's played Origin and punches well above his weight all the time, Ruben Cotter. The just looking flat and tired. And he's a guy who's always full energy. So obviously, whatever happened to get him up for the Broncos game, and we talked about it late last week. The Todd Payton had him primed. He was talking about the hatred. He had him ready to go, and they fell flatter than any team. Probably actually, that's probably a bit unfair because plenty of teams have fallen flat and got beaten by 50 or 60. I just don't think that always happens against a team that absolutely clicks like we saw from the Roosters. Well, I can definitely see them bouncing back. Like they don't just become horrible, and they've got just too much class all over the pitch. So, I still think that they're going to be there or thereabouts, and I don't know about scraping, but I still think they'll make that top 8. I mean, either of those two teams, the Dogs or the Cowboys, will just be cannon fodder for the rest. But I still think it's the Cowboys.
Yeah, look, mate, as we say, the time will tell for me with the Cowboys. The good news for Cowboys fans, their next 3 games couldn't have been easier for them. So they play the Titans, they go into the Eels, they have a bye, and then they've got the Tigers. So if they don't win those 3 games, and they don't deserve to be in the top 8, obviously, but it can't have been much easier than that. To your point, mate, I think you're smack bang on the mark with the Broncos. I think that game would have sapped a lot out of them. It was a full house. They were absolutely hanging off the rafters in Townsville. And to your point, they all knew that not only was that a big win for them, but that was going to put the Broncos out of the semis for the year officially. So they put everything they had into that, and it was an outstanding performance. That intensity in that first 10 to 15 minutes was almost Origin-like. So that would have sapped a lot out of them. And I think they just come up against a Roosters side that was absolutely red hot, and it wouldn't have mattered. I think they wouldn't have been 82 points, but I think they would have beaten almost anyone the way they played last weekend. So for them to have those 3 games and then to have the Raiders at home, I think they will, to your point, have enough wins in the bank to be able to get them. They're probably only got to win 2 games. I think 13 wins is going to get them over the line. So I certainly think there's enough wins in there for them. It'll just be how they get those wins, because trying to get over an 80-point or 82-point beating is a big mental thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And emotional. I think the big thing with that, like getting up for that, like emotionally you just fall flat because it's, it does take a lot out of you. A bit like post-Origin in a way, but obviously not at the same level. If you look at the Dogs draw, if the Dogs do make it, well, you would be confident going into that first week of finals, given they've got to play the Roosters, the Bunnies, and the Panthers. Their other 2 games are winnable, but certainly not walkovers. They got the Dragons who are up and about, and that Southern derby's always got plenty of feeling. It's going to come down to the last round against the Broncos, and who knows what we'll get from the Broncos by then.
Yeah. Well, you're 100% right, mate. And we talked about how important that was for the Roosters' points difference. They went from about 80 up to 150 odd. The Cowboys, it was opposite. They were almost, they were about 10 or 12. Now they're up almost 100. So the flick for the Cowboys has been quite difficult. So, they're going to be competing with South and Canterbury for the final 2 spots, and that puts them well behind the 8 ball, mate. So they got a chance not only to get these next 3 wins, but they've got to rack up some points against 3 of the weaker teams in the competition, 13th, 14th and 16th. They've got to try and put some runs on the board to try and get their for and against back in order. But to your point, mate, obviously the Cowboys have already had 1 extra win than the Bulldogs and South. And with that draw, I think the Cowboys will still get in. But how they look and how they feel week 1 of the semi-finals is going to be a big one.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at the Cowboys' last game, they've got the Raiders. Now, that's up in North Queensland. You'd expect that to be an easy win. But my mind goes back. I don't know if you remember this. It was back when Mick Ennis was playing for the Dragons. Or actually, may not have been. I think it was around that time, though. And the Dragons weren't going to make the 8, but they went up to the Broncos. And I remember it ruined my tipping because I was like in contention. And they went up there last game of the season, and I remember saying to my brother, like, oh, how on earth have they won that? He said, well, you're a sports person. You still want to win. Imagine going up to Brisbane, having a good win, and then it's the last game of the year, and you go out and party like it's no one's business. Yeah. And I'm like, Yeah, okay, it's a good point. So you wouldn't put it past the Raiders going up there for one last big push for their last game of the year, because there's a lot of talk about the night out in the
Yep.
in the
Yeah, 100%. It'll probably,
in
to your
Townsville.
point, it'll probably be Parley's last game in Raiders colours, so they'll be out to win. And I don't think Ricky Stewart will like a loss no matter when it is. How's this for a mouth-watering thought, though? I think the Dolphins are a lock at 5th spot. If the Cowboys sit at 8th, first week of the semi-finals, a full Suncorp, Cowboys v Dolphins, Sunday afternoon, 4 o'clock. It will be an absolute electric game of rugby league. So we're getting ahead of ourselves, but I just mouth-watering thought that one.
Another thought: are we making the wrong assumption that the Bunnies are just going to make the back end of the 8? Because they're still plagued by injuries, and their draw is not fantastic either.
Yeah, true. They have got a number of players back this week. So Fafita will be back from suspension. There's a couple of others that old Wayne mentioned at the press conference that they're expecting. Cam Murray. There's a few others off the top of my head. I'll try and think while we're talking, mate. But their big one, I'm not expecting them to see the back of. They're not to see Latrell come back, and if he does, I think it'll be right on. Basically semi-final time. It seems to be continuing to get worse. That injury, or they just can't put their finger on fixing it. So he's going to be a massive one. There's no doubt about it. But I think with who they've got coming back, I think they've shown enough. Tallis Duncan's the other one. So Duncan, Murray and Fafita should all be back, which is 3 pretty impressive footballers. So, I think they'll have enough to make the 8. But again, I think it'll be one of those bottom teams. I think the 8's just about locked as it is. It'll just be movements and whether the Cowboys, come out of that funk and knock over a few of those bottom teams.
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't go into great depth about this game, but the Sharks, they are really they're on a roll. And a team's going well when they don't play fantastic and they still win and win well. And the score, like you said at the start, the score probably doesn't reflect the one-sided nature of that game. Nico Hines, Braden Trindle still going very well. I did notice on one of the reels we put out that someone's called Nico a big game choker, and given past experiences, you probably can't argue that too much. So that'd be the only concern for them. Go on.
Yeah, no, look, you're right, mate. There's no doubt about it. And I think he's even gotten to the stage where, he's admitted it internally and even to the media at times where he hasn't capitalised on those big game moments, even as far back as Origin when he was playing some of those games. So, this particular game, obviously the 10 in the bin early, Iro, HIA, etc., that had an impact on the game. But they got the job done, and they got the job done once again. They're 5-0. They certainly handled Origin better than any other team. It is just sort of, they've gone about it a bit different this year, the Sharks. The knock on the Sharks are that they're always at that top level in the top couple of teams. Come semi-final time, they bundle out. This year, they had a bit more of a slower start, and they've built to the season. So whether that's an active thing that they've done with the strength and conditioning, whether that's a different mental approach, whether they've changed something up, but they just seem to be building different this year. I still have them probably the weaker of the 4 teams in the top 4, but for mine, I think that it's a little bit harsh on anyone to not give them the absolute chance of tumbling. They could finish as high as second when you consider Penrith have to play the Roosters and the Warriors. They all play each other, and the Sharks have got a dream run home. So they do finish second. That's going to be a huge advantage to them because no one wants to be travelling over to New Zealand. So I still think that the Sharks have got every possible chance to win this competition, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. You nailed it because it has been a different build-in. They're often quite consistent but not really setting the world on fire, and then they've gone out straight sets a couple of times. We did get a little bit not excited, but we did think there might be something to them last year when they started playing up the middle, getting on the over the advantage line, and allowing Brayley and Trindle and Hines to play off the back of that. But it didn't eventuate in the finals. This year does definitely feel different. How they've started slow, just done enough, and now really building momentum. So yeah, it's not going to be that same thought that if they lose the first week they're probably done. You'd expect they're going to be in that prelim final and be a red hot chance in whoever they play. Yeah. Now let's get from the penthouse to the outhouse, as they say. Now you said you couldn't even get through this game. I wanted to turn it off. About 10 minutes in the second half. I just can't do this. At one point in the second half, Para didn't complete 6 sets in a row. And how we were still in that game, the only reason we're still in that game is because the Tigers were so poor. It was a stinker.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I haven't got much to add in this game. It's just disappointing. Look, the poor old Eels have done their best. I know you're an absolute diehard fan, mate. The Eels have done their best with a pretty poor season. They haven't had a great deal of luck with injuries, even bounces of the ball at different times. They're just not playing good footy. But for the Tigers fans, I'm just devastated for them. Like they started the year the way they did. There was a lot of promise, a lot of hope. The fans were up and about. The media was patting them on the back. And then the wheels just fell off. And you now go to a game to watch the Tigers play, and you just can't get through it. It's just absolutely horrendous. So I think, it's one of those ones for the Eels, I think more so that when you're playing with another team, you sort of get dragged down to their standard. And don't get me wrong, the Eels have not been tremendous by any stretch throughout the season, but absolute bludger of a game, mate. Lucky it was put on at the right time, Sunday afternoon when everyone had given up the ghost. But the 13,000 people that turned up probably deserve free season tickets for next year because it was a bludger.
Yeah, well, I think it says everything. That it sounded like there were more Para fans than Tigers fans. The interesting thing the Adam Dewey thing last week is that they kept talking about it in the commentary on Fox that you expect Dewey to come out, run the football, really try and make a statement, and he just didn't. Yeah. And actually, Para probably should have been 4 tries, maybe 5 tries up at half time, but they just couldn't hang on to the ball. Like that's the frustrating thing, is there are moments where we're just cutting teams to ribbon, but then just inexplicably just turn the ball over. Josh Adokar, as good as he was running the ball, he dropped 2 balls that were just certain tries, and then that just started filtering through the whole team. Now the Tigers weren't much better, so then the start of the second half was much the same. Then all of a sudden the game changes because you can't give the ball over 6 possessions in a row and expect to hang on. And then suddenly the Tigers are right back in the game. And I just remember thinking, if we lose this would just be the greatest embarrassment of all time because the Tigers were so poor.
Yeah.
And yet somehow they got back into the game. All the doomsdayers for both teams will say, well, they got nothing, but all that can change with a good start to next year, and both teams have got a really young squad in the main, and I think both teams are probably a few purchases away from being any sort of threat for a good couple of years. But in saying that, we've seen what the Dragons did, and who knows what will fall out of the tree in this off-season as teams look to either strengthen or clear out their roster over the off-season.
Yeah, I think you smack bang on, mate. I just don't see it for this season getting any better. They play the Roosters and the Panthers Sunday afternoon on the way home. That could be another cricket score. I think the Tigers will be hoping that some of those clubs rest players, or it could be some big shellackings. I know I'll probably cop a fair bit on social media for this, wearing a Dragons hat, but I think the Tigers have been the worst team in the comp this year for the way they started and the talent they had. I think they've been atrocious. So the back end of this season has just summed it up for me. So there needs to be a number of things that they have to once again do another review on because they're just not getting so many things right at the Tigers. I think those early games with the new rules that we started the season, they got those wins under their belt, which is just a false economy. And I think if the referees had been reffing the whole season like they are now, I don't think the Tigers are doing quite well at all, mate, truth be told. So disappointed for the fans because they've just copped an absolute pounding year after year after year. So, hope they turn it around, but I can't see too many upsides over the next month of footy, and then it'll be on to next season for the Tigers.
Yeah, I've got to pull you up on that one though, mate. Like you're because the Dragons have bought so well and had a little bit of a turnaround of form. It doesn't take away what we saw in the first 2/3 of the season from the Dragons. There were weeks where they were awful, mate.
Mate, listen, not since Young been at the helm. I'll tip you into that. The good news is that next week, round 24, the Tigers play the Dragons. It'll be an absolute belter. Don't miss that game, whatever you do.
I do believe that Young was in charge for the Anzac Day massacre, mate. So,
yeah, that wasn't pretty.
Oh, how quickly we forget. The Tigers did go on a very good run where they won 5 of 7. The Dragons have done nothing like that, mate. So I can't agree. And we can say that the referees did a different job at the start of the year, but that's how it was refereed. And you're still going to win the games, and the good teams have been able to do that. And I think you're. You missed the mark on that one, mate.
Sounds like you don't want to support the Eels anymore, mate. You want to buy a Tigers membership out at Leichhardt. You are keen on them.
No, not at all, mate. I just want to. I'm sure every person listening to this, apart from your dad, would want me to pull you into line to suggest that the Dragons have had a better year than the Tigers. Come on, mate.
Oh yeah. We'll we might do a deep dive into that in the off season and see who's had a better year.
Dragons wins 2, Tigers wins 7.
Yeah. We'll see how it finishes, mate. We'll certainly win the spoon. There's no doubt about it. But anyway, I genuinely feel sorry for the Tigers fans. So I'd love to see him get a win on the way in. I can't see it happening, but I just feel for him, mate. It's always bad news in the media. It's always hoping, and like halfway through the season, we're picking them to make the top 8. That was how strongly they started the season, and then unfortunately the wheels just fell off for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in saying that, they are sitting between 12th and 16th. There's one win, and then if you go up one more to 11th, there's 2 wins. So any one of those teams there with a strong finish could have a very respectable 10th or 11th or even 10th finish, because the Seagulls have hit a brick wall as well. So let's just reserve our judgment on all of that until the end. Because there's plenty to play out. Now, I'm going to call Gags a bit soft on this. His power rankings, there's an opportunity to really make a statement with this, but he's kept at the status quo. No change for the power rankings this week.
No change for the 3rd week in a row. So the power rankings are as are the NRL ladder. Penrith, Roosters, Warriors, Sharks. He's kept them exactly the same. The Finns are in there in 5th spot. Look, can't really dispute. He may have 1 or 2 around the wrong way, but they're the teams that have been, between them 5 teams, they've only lost 4 games over the last 5 rounds. So they've certainly been the form teams of the comp. But as we've said, and can't wait to get to Wednesday's show to talk about it. So make sure you subscribe and share and have a listen. But they're starting to play each other. Like the Warriors and Panthers this weekend will be absolute game of the year. Roosters play the Dogs, which is a big one. And then no matter how bad the Broncos are playing, Dolphins v Broncos will be another big one. So while I think he's got it right, don't be surprised if there's some movement over the next couple of weeks with the power rankings from Gagan.
Well, one that I would have had based, well, and I'm surprised he hasn't given his affiliation with the Sharks, is them jumping one above the Wars, given the recent form line. Now, the Warriors did have a good win on the weekend, but before that, they got beaten by the Dogs. They only just got home against the Dragons, beaten by the Dolphins 2 weeks before that, and then a good win by the Sharks against them a couple of weeks before that as well. But yeah, it's probably a bit unfair to suggest that it could have been anything how it is now. But yeah, I'd have been tempted by that if I was him. But that's why we get the experts in, mate, to make these calls.
It sounds like you've opened the door for the Warriors fans to give you another belting over the week.
Probably won't put that one on socials.
Very good.
Oh, mate, yeah, absolutely. Like Steve said, make sure you let your mates know. We're going to continue to talk about everything NRL, our opinions, no agendas, just two old blokes yelling at clouds. But yeah, we also need a favour from you guys to make sure you subscribe, because there's still plenty that are watching but aren't subscribing, or follow if you're on one of the other platforms. And yeah, we'll keep bringing this to you every week. See you on Wednesday, Steve.
Cheers, buddy.